and every story can change the world. Together we are Global Speakers Talk.
Hello everyone, I'm Rayner and I'm delighted to be here today. Now, I'm not a magician, but I am known for giving people 5 to 8 hours of time back in their weeks. Now, I can't promise that in 15 short minutes I will conjure that time for you, but I can promise you that I will show you the strategy that will allow you to achieve it. But before we jump in, I have a question for you to think about. If I give you 5 to 8 hours of time, what will you use that time for? Will you fill it with more busy? Or will you invest it wisely in something that will build your future success and well-being? Now, the promise of AI is that it will make us more efficient and more effective and hence create time. So let me ask you, how much are you using AI? Are you using it every day? Are you using it all day, every day? Amazing. So if you're using AI, you must have more time than ever before, right? Well, when I ask this question, usually 90% of the people say, no, I don't have more time than ever. I feel like I'm running faster than ever before. So what's going wrong here? I call this the productivity lie of AI. And what's happening is that AI is a double-edged sword when it comes to time. Yes, it makes us more efficient, but because it allows us to do more, guess what? We do more. We create more stuff. We don't create more time. So here's the big idea I want you to take away from today. Choose to be intentional about how you create, protect, and use time. And be intentional about how you use AI to do this. Because when you choose to create, protect, and use time, and you are intentional about how you do that, that will determine whether you just run faster and faster in the direction that you're heading now, or whether you are able to change your trajectory and build something better. In July 2018, I moved my family to Singapore to take up a big new role, and work was full on. And my kids were small, and so family was full on. And 6 months in, I was close to burnout, and I realized I needed to do something to refill my bucket, to give me something so that I had more to give. So I screwed up my courage and I went and talked to my husband and my kids, and I said, I just need a couple of hours each weekend to go and do something for me by myself. Is that okay? And they just shrugged and went, yeah, okay, and turned back to whatever they were doing. It was all in my head. It was never them stopping me from doing what I needed to do for me. And that was the moment I realized we have more control over time than we think we do. And when we are intentional about how we use that time, it can be life-changing. But if we are going to be intentional about time, we need to pause and reflect on what true productivity is. Because the world tells us that productivity is about getting more done today, ticking more tasks off the to-do list. This is the world we've been raised in. If you want to succeed, you work hard, you put in the hours, you hustle. But if you look at the top 1%, the most productive and effective people in the world, they understand that productivity, true productivity, is creating time as an investment for tomorrow. And actually, that our most productive time happens when we create space for our brains to do their best work, creative thinking, innovation, problem solving. Albert Einstein was famous for walking every lunchtime religiously because that was how his brain synthesized ideas. Melanie Perkins, who's the Canva co-founder, regularly schedules what she calls maker days, that are blocks of nothing in her calendar, full days, because that's where she comes up with her best ideas. Dr. Fiona Wood, who invented the spray-on skin that saved the lives of millions of the Bali bombing victims, says all her best ideas come when she creates space to run or walk. So true productivity is not doing more things. It is achieving outcomes in less time. And so sometimes the most productive thing that we can do is create time for our brains to do its best work. I'm going to give you a framework which will allow you to be more intentional about creating time. And I call this framework Design for Time. And there are 3 building blocks to create the structure, the productivity improvements, and the culture where it's possible to make room in your work week to create this time. So I want to invite you to draw a triangle in front of you. On the first side, label this the constraint of time. So the constraint of time is a catalyst for looking at how we work and what we choose to work on and finding ways to design these better. So label the second side productivity bargain. A productivity bargain incentivizes and empowers your team to solve the inefficiencies and the frustrations of their role together. And the third side, label this one shift the system. Shift the system, not the individual, because one person alone can't get control of their work schedule. But when you look at the system and you can change the culture around how time is valued in an organization, then magic happens. But here's the important thing. You need all 3 elements to unlock that 5 to 8 hours per week. And I'm going to unpack each of those elements in a bit of detail to help you understand what it takes to put in place this strategy to design for time. So let's start with the constraint of time. We've all grown up in this world that tells us to get great results, you have to work harder, you have to hustle, more hours are the best workers. And this is a lie. There's a guy called Chris Bailey who is literally obsessed with productivity. And he did this experiment where he worked 90-hour weeks, and then he worked 20-hour weeks, and then 90, and then 20, alternating, and he measured the results. And he found 2 critical things. The first thing he found was that he achieved almost the same amount in his 20-hour weeks as in his 90-hour weeks. The extra 70 hours delivered minimal return on his effort. But the second interesting thing was that he felt so much more productive in the 90 hours because he ticked more things off his to-do list. So he was really surprised when he looked at the data and discovered he was about the same in terms of real productivity, in terms of the outcomes he actually achieved in his 20 hours as in the 90 hours. And this feeling that he experienced is because we are all conditioned to feel that busy is the same as productive, which is why when we pick up AI, we use AI to do more busy, to do more things. So how do we disrupt this? We disrupt it through the constraint of time, through giving ourselves less time for business as usual. What that does is almost like flicking a switch for continuous improvement. It's a switch that the Japanese seem to have mastered. So Japanese consumers have the most refined palates in the world, and they could taste when sashimi fish had been frozen on the way to market. And so the fishermen built saltwater tanks on their boats to keep the fish alive. But in those safe tanks, the fish became lazy. They stopped swimming fast and their muscles softened, and Japanese consumers could taste the difference. So the fishermen put a small shark in the tanks. They lost a couple of fish on the way to market, but the remaining fish were forced to stay sharp and swim fast. And you want everyone in your team or business to be like the fish in the tank, sharp and focused, thinking, is this the best use of my time right now? The constraint of time is your shark at work. The second side of the triangle is a productivity bargain. Make a productivity bargain with your team. And this is where you say to them, or agree with each other, if we can find a way to deliver our outcomes in less time, we get to keep that time or use that time for something important for our future. I was working with a government specialist services agency called Early Childhood Outcomes, and they had 50% burnout, and they knew more change was coming, so they had to do something differently. They made a productivity bargain, and they agreed to use the time that they created for focus time and strategic thinking. And in this way, they changed the culture around how time was valued and empowered everyone at all levels of the organization to be intentional about what they chose to use their time for. They saved 700 meeting hours a week, and burnout dropped from 50% to 7% in 6 months. The third piece of the triangle, which this team, the ECO team, did, was to shift the system rather than trying to fix the individuals. So what really made the difference for them was the work that they did to identify and address the root cause of busy in their work design. And that clarity on the problem was what then helped them to find the right solutions. I remember the best boss I ever had used to constantly ask me, what's the real problem we are solving here? And this is particularly relevant in a world of AI. Just because you can use AI to do something doesn't mean that you should. But how do you get clear on the root cause of busy so you know what is most valuable to solve, whether it's with AI or not? Well, don't start with the AI. Start with the friction that you need to solve. When I work with organizations, I take them through a productivity audit. And there are 4 pillars that we use to look at their business with fresh eyes and identify the pain points, i.e. opportunities, to do things better. And the 4 pillars are these. Number 1, creating uninterrupted time for deep work. Number 2, the systems, processes, and automation, and AI fits in that bucket as well, that allow you to work smart, work efficiently. Number 3, interpersonal effectiveness, which I always say is the biggest productivity lever that we never think of as a productivity lever. And number 4 is well-being. Mental, physical, and social well-being. Because if you're going to constrain the amount of time, put that shark in the tank, that you allow for business as usual work, you're going to be operating at a higher intensity. And so you need your well-being to support that intensity. So going back to the ECO team, they learned through this audit that there were a few big opportunities for them. There was creating time for focus and deep work. Addressing meeting culture was a big part of that. They also identified that how they prioritize which work to do and what projects to prioritize was important. And there was another element around giving people permission to and a guideline to decide what they chose to spend their time on. But ultimately, they learned to be intentional about time. They learned that creating strategic focus time is the most productive thing that they can do, and that to create that time, they need to stop accepting busy as being the same as productive. So they learned to design for time, to create, protect, and utilize time systematically. And they did this through identifying those root causes of frictions or busyness and addressing the priority ones. And most importantly, they worked together as a team to create this change, because creating time is not something that any one of us individually can easily do and maintain in today's complex and interconnected world of work. So the most important shift they made was to make a productivity bargain as a team. So they created time, protected time, and utilized that time by agreeing on changes in how they worked together. They created a day a week of productive time and reduced burnout. You can too. The only question is, will you give it a try? Thank you.
Together we are Global Speakers Talk.